Life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. But sometimes, those challenges can lead to something truly beautiful. This is the story of Emma Johnson, a single mother struggling to provide for her son, Noah, while working tirelessly to build a better life. When she meets Jacob Garrison, the CEO of a prestigious company, in a moment of desperation, neither of them expects the life-altering connection that follows. Their journey together is filled with lessons about resilience, love, and the unexpected ways life changes when we allow ourselves to take risks. Subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. The morning sun filtered through the towering glass windows of Garrison Global Enterprises, casting an almost otherworldly glow across the lobby. The marble floors reflected the light like a mirror, each step I took echoing in the vast space as I made my way across the room. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands shook slightly, holding onto my worn leather portfolio. I felt out of place, as if I didn't belong here in this corporate temple of success. The sleek, pristine surroundings stood in stark contrast to my second-hand blazer, the fabric already showing signs of wear after years of use. I had long mastered the art of making things look more expensive than they actually were. But standing here in this pristine lobby, it all seemed insignificant. Nothing I did could change the truth. I was just a single mother, desperately trying to make ends meet. Please, 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 I whispered to myself, pressing the elevator button repeatedly. The interview was in 12 minutes, and I needed this job more than I had ever needed anything. Well, almost anything. The image of my son, Noah, his gap-toothed smile this morning as I dropped him off at Mrs. Thompson's, filled my thoughts and gave me the strength to keep moving forward. I'll make dinosaur nuggets for dinner if you're good today, buddy, I had promised. Even though it was the last package in the freezer, I'd skipped my own breakfast again, saving the remaining cereal for Noah. The rent was due next week, and our kitchen cabinets were almost bare. But I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his eyes if there was nothing special to eat. His smile mattered more than anything. As I waited for the elevator, I felt the weight of the world bearing down on me. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, studying the company's recent acquisitions, understanding their marketing strategies, and taking night classes in business administration. I had worked so hard, squeezing homework in between shifts, studying long after Noah had fallen asleep. This job, executive assistant to the marketing director, could change everything. It would mean no more choosing between buying food and paying the electricity bill. No more watering down milk to make it last longer. No more pretending I wasn't hungry so Noah could have a full meal. It would mean security, a chance to give Noah the life he deserved, away from the constant financial strain we had been living under. The elevator doors finally slid open, and I darted inside, pressing the button for the 47th floor, praying that nothing would go wrong. But just as the doors began to close, a hand shot through the gap. The doors reversed, revealing a man who seemed to have stepped straight out of a magazine. Tall, impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that likely cost more than my entire year's rent. He smiled apologetically at me as he stepped into the elevator. "Thanks for holding it," he said, his voice warm and rich with a slight accent I couldn't place. It sounded like he was from somewhere else, but I couldn't quite figure out where. I managed a polite nod, my mind racing with interview questions and responses I had rehearsed countless times. I focused on the position, on the salary, on everything I had worked for, trying to block out the reality of the man standing next to me. This was my chance to change everything. But as the elevator hummed upward, I couldn't help but feel the stark difference between him and me. He was polished, confident, and unbothered by the ordinary struggles of life. Meanwhile, I was a single mother, desperately hoping for a chance to prove I could make something more of myself. The elevator passed the 20th floor when I heard a strange grinding sound. The car shuddered, and I felt my stomach lurch as it came to a sudden halt. The lights flickered once, then twice, before stabilizing. Panic rose in my chest. No, 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 I whispered to myself, pressing the emergency button with trembling fingers. This couldn't be happening. My interview was in 8 minutes, and I needed to be there. My phone, of course, had no signal. Hey, it's okay, the man said, his calm, steady voice breaking through my panic. These things usually resolve pretty quickly. He pressed the call button himself. And a crackly voice informed us that maintenance was aware of the issue and working to resolve it. I swallowed hard, fighting the rising anxiety. I have an interview, I blurted out, my voice cracking slightly. It's really important. The man looked at me for a moment, his green-gold eyes studying my face. Tell me about it, he said, loosening his tie slightly and leaning back against the elevator wall. What's the position? Maybe it was the stress. Or maybe it was something in his expression. But I found myself opening up to him. I told him everything, how I had been preparing for weeks. How much this job meant for me and Noah. I even told him about the night classes. About my struggle to juggle everything, work, school, and being a mother. He listened patiently, his expression softening as I spoke. And Noah? He asked, his voice gentle. I pulled out my phone, showing him the lock screen photo of Noah, my little boy. With his dark curls and dimpled cheeks. He's my whole world, I said softly, the love for him flooding my chest. He looked at the photo for a moment, his gaze lingering on Noah's face. He looks like a great kid, he said, his voice full of something I couldn't quite place, maybe pain. Maybe longing. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes. A shared empathy that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. That's why this interview means everything, I said. I want to give him the life he deserves. The man was quiet for a moment, then said, can I give you some interview tips? I've conducted quite a few in my time. I was taken aback by his offer. But something in his tone made me feel at ease. For the next 20 minutes. As maintenance worked on the elevator, he coached me through potential questions, offering insights I had never considered. He had a way of making complex corporate concepts simple and clear. And despite the panic bubbling inside me, I found myself laughing at his clever observations about office politics. He told me I had something many candidates didn't, genuine determination and resilience. And that, he said, was something I should never be afraid to show. Before I realized it, the elevator began moving again. And my heart sank. I was now officially late for the interview. My chances felt like they were slipping away. But the man simply smiled at me, his eyes warm with something I couldn't quite name. What floor are you heading to? He asked as the elevator continued its journey. 47, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my disappointment. His expression flickered with surprise. And I saw a hint of amusement before the elevator doors slid open to reveal the 47th floor. He gestured for me to exit first. I nodded, my heart full of gratitude. Not just for the tips, but for the way he had made this terrifying experience much less scary. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than just for the courtesy. The pleasure was mine, he said with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. But then, before I could ask his name, he pressed a button, and the elevator doors closed between us. Confusion filled me as I stood there for a moment. But I quickly turned toward the reception desk. Miss Johnson, Mr. Garrison is ready to see you now, the secretary said with a slight smile. And everything clicked into place. The man in the elevator. He was Mr. Garrison, the CEO. The realization hit me like a freight train. And I couldn't help but wonder what this meant for the future. What kind of change had I just stepped into? As I followed the secretary down the hallway toward Mr. Garrison's office. My mind raced. Everything had been a blur. From the moment I stepped into that elevator to now. The man, Jacob Garrison, the CEO, had been so calm, so composed, offering me advice in a way that made me feel like I wasn't just another candidate. The thought that he might have been paying attention to me at all, let alone offering to help, seemed too surreal to process. Mr. Garrison will see you now, the secretary announced, opening the door to a large, sleek office. The view from the windows was breathtaking. The city sprawling beneath us, its skyline bathed in the soft afternoon light. But my focus wasn't on the view. It was on him, Jacob Garrison, standing by the window, looking out at the city with a contemplative expression. Come in, Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice warm but authoritative, pulling me from my thoughts. Please, Have a seat. I nodded and stepped into the room, my legs feeling like jelly. I couldn't believe I was about to have a one-on-one with the CEO. The very man I had met just moments ago in the elevator, coaching me like a mentor. As I sat down across from him, I couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in his demeanor. The easy warmth he had shown in the elevator was replaced by a more professional, calculated tone. I understand you've been with Garrison Global for quite some time, but I have to admit, your persistence in applying for multiple positions over the past year caught my attention. He began, his eyes meeting mine with a piercing intensity. Not many people would have the drive to apply to different roles within the company, especially when one didn't work out. But you kept going. I shifted in my seat, trying to compose myself. I believe in the company's mission of sustainable development, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. Each position I applied for aligned with my skills and experience. I know I could make a difference here. Jacob's eyes softened slightly, and he leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the surface of his desk. You've also shown a great deal of resilience, he said thoughtfully. I've read the reports on your volunteer work, especially your time at the children's hospital, reading to those kids in the oncology ward. Despite all the challenges you're facing in your personal life, it says a lot about you. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. I don't have much to give, I said quietly, but I can at least give them a little bit of joy, even if it's just for an hour. Jacob studied me for a long moment, his gaze lingering on my face, before he spoke again. That's what I admire about you, Emma. You have the heart of someone who truly cares. Even when things aren't easy, you don't let your struggles define you. That's a rare quality, especially in a world that values results above all else. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but I felt a sudden surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I had a chance here. But I still didn't know what role he was offering me, or if I was even going to get the job. Then, Jacob leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. I want to offer you something, Emma, a position that's not what you applied for, but one I believe you're more than qualified for. He paused, watching my reaction closely. I need a new chief of staff. My heart skipped a beat. Chief of staff? That was a huge leap from the executive assistant role I had applied for. It felt too big, too far out of reach. But Jacob continued, his voice steady. You'd be working closely with me, coordinating with department heads, managing high-level projects, and essentially helping me run the company. The salary is triple what the executive assistant position offered. I sat there, stunned. Triple the salary. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. More than I could even imagine. The thought of a steady income, of financial stability, made my head spin. It meant I could finally stop worrying about every dollar. No more empty cabinets. No more choosing between bills and meals. And Noah could have everything he deserved. I don't know what to say. I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Surely there are more qualified candidates out there. Jacob's eyes softened again, and he leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Because in that elevator, I saw something in you that I don't see in many people. Preparedness, resourcefulness, and most of all, a genuine passion for what you do. You've shown me that, despite everything you've been through, you still have the strength to keep going. That's the kind of person I want on my team. I took a deep breath, trying to absorb everything he was saying. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. But it also terrified me. I had never been in a position of such responsibility. Could I handle it? Could I be the person Jacob believed I could be? For a moment, I was lost in the weight of the decision. But then Jacob's voice broke through my thoughts. So, he said, his tone lightening a little. What do you think, Emma? Are you ready to take on a challenge? I hesitated for just a second before answering, my voice steady and sure. Yes, I said quietly, I'm ready. Jacob's smile was brief, but it was enough to make me believe that, for the first time in a long while, I was on the verge of something bigger than I could have ever imagined. As I left Jacob's office, the weight of what had just transpired pressed heavily on my chest. I could barely process it. A job as chief of staff? A position that, just an hour ago, had seemed completely out of reach, was now mine, if I chose to accept it. The salary alone felt like a dream, something I had never thought possible. But it wasn't just the money that made my heart race with both excitement and fear. It was the opportunity to truly make a difference. To have an impact not just on the company, but on my own life. And knows, I had been so focused on just getting by, surviving from one day to the next, that I had never allowed myself to think beyond the daily struggles. But here I was, holding in my hands the key to a future I had never dared to imagine. I could see Noah's face, the hope in his eyes, the joy he had every time I managed to give him something special. Even if it was just a dinosaur-shaped nugget for dinner. But with this job, I could give him so much more. I could give him stability. I could give him the life he deserved. But as I stood by the elevator, waiting to go back down, I couldn't help but think about Jacob, about the man I had just met in that same elevator, who had guided me through those critical moments of uncertainty. What had driven him to offer me such an incredible opportunity? It wasn't just the job. It wasn't just my qualifications or my persistence. There was something else, something deeper. He had seen something in me, something I didn't even know was there. And maybe, just maybe, he saw a part of himself in me as well. The next day, I found myself back in the office, settling into my new role. The weight of the position was overwhelming. But I felt ready to prove that I belonged here. Ready to show that I was more than just a single mother. More than just someone who had been struggling to get by. But as I walked into the office, I couldn't escape the whispers. They were there, as I expected. People talked about how I had gotten the job, how I had managed to win over Jacob. Some of it was subtle, others less so. But the rumors were there, and they cut deep. I tried to keep my head down, to focus on my work. But the gossip followed me. I heard the comments, felt the stares. She got the job because she was in the elevator with him. One person whispered, she must have done her research on his dead daughter just to get his attention. Another muttered. The whispers stung, each one like a dagger to my heart. I had worked so hard to get here, to prove that I was capable. But none of that seemed to matter in the eyes of some people. The whispers had already created a narrative. It was hard to ignore. It was hard to separate the work I had done from the rumors. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't let them define me. I couldn't let their judgments influence what I had worked so hard to achieve. I had a job to do. And it wasn't just for me. It was for Noah, for our future. Then one evening, just after a particularly challenging board meeting, Jacob found me in my office. His presence was always commanding. But tonight, there was something softer in his gaze. Something that told me he had noticed the whispers. He had noticed how the office had been treating me. Walk with me, he said, and I followed him, unsure of what to expect. We ended up on the rooftop terrace, a quiet space that I had discovered during late-night work sessions. The city lights twinkled below, but it felt as though time had slowed. The noise of the office far away. Jacob stood by the railing, looking out over the city, as if gathering his thoughts. You've heard the rumors, he said quietly, not turning to look at me. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. They're not true, he continued, and you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. Emma, your work speaks for itself. But I know it's harder than it seems. I looked at him, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the city lights. There was something vulnerable in his eyes. A glimpse of the man I had met in the elevator. The one who had shown me kindness and empathy when I needed it most. I don't want to be seen as someone who only got here because of a moment in an elevator, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I've worked so hard for this. And it feels like everything I've done is being dismissed. Jacob turned to face me, his eyes filled with understanding. I know, he said softly. I see you, Emma, and I see what you're capable of. The rumors, they don't define you. You're here because you earned it. Because you're the kind of person who doesn't give up. Who keeps fighting no matter the odds. That's what I admire about you. His words were a balm to the wounds the whispers had created. It was the first time I felt seen for who I truly was. Someone who had fought for everything. Not just for a job, but for a future. For Noah. We stood there in silence. The weight of his words settling over me like a promise. In that moment, I realized that the opinions of others didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. The truth that I was here because I had earned my place. And nothing could take that away from me. As the night stretched on, I knew I had a long road ahead of me. The whispers wouldn't stop immediately. But for the first time in a long while, I felt strong enough to face them. With Jacob's support, and the knowledge that I had earned this place in the world, I was ready to prove myself. Not just to the company, but to myself. As the days passed, the whispers at work slowly faded into the background. It wasn't that they stopped entirely, but they became less important. The more I focused on my work, the more I realized that the only opinion that mattered was my own. Jacob's faith in me, his recognition of my dedication, was a powerful force in my life. It wasn't just about the job anymore, it was about the chance to prove that I could not only survive, but thrive, no matter the odds. I continued to work closely with Jacob, learning and growing in ways I had never imagined. The challenges were vast, but they only made me stronger. With every project I helped lead, I saw a future unfolding before me. A future where I wasn't just a struggling single mother, but a woman who had found her place in the world, who had overcome every obstacle life had thrown her way. And then, one afternoon, as I sat at my desk, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Thompson. Noah asked when he could meet the man with the green eyes. He says you smile different when you talk about him. I smiled softly, a warmth spreading through me. Maybe it wasn't just about the job. Maybe it was about finding love again. The kind that didn't ask for anything but offered everything in return. In that moment, I realized that sometimes, the most beautiful changes in life come when you're brave enough to let them happen. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what the future might bring. Thank you for reading this life story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos of inspiring journeys and life-changing moments. Stay tuned for the next story.